You think talent is the key, because that's the lie you were sold to protect weak men. Talent sounds sexy. Discipline sounds boring. And that's exactly why most of you are broke, unfocused, and invisible. I don't care how gifted you think you are. If you can't control yourself, you are nothing. The world doesn't reward potential. It rewards output. And output only comes from discipline. This is where it gets uncomfortable, because now there's nowhere to hide. Let me shock you with reality. Every talented man you admire who failed didn't lose because he lacked ability. He lost because he lacked structure. He woke up when he felt like it. He trained when he felt motivated. He worked when the mood was right. That's not freedom. That's slavery to emotion. The disciplined man wins even when he's tired, bored, angry, or uninspired. Talent begs for conditions. Discipline creates domination in any condition. Here's the part most people are too weak to understand. Discipline is learning to speak in tongues, but not the religious nonsense you've heard. I'm talking about a private internal language, a language of commands, not feelings. When your mind says stop, discipline answers in a different tongue, a colder tongue, a sharper one, a language that doesn't negotiate. That inner voice isn't emotional, it's programmed. It says move, execute, finish. That's transformation. That's control. Most men speak the language of comfort. Sleep more, scroll more, delay more. That language makes you soft. Discipline replaces it with a dominant dialect. Early mornings, repetition, pain without complaint. When you change the language you speak to yourself, you change your identity. You stop being a man who tries. You become a man who does. And once that switch flips, talent becomes irrelevant because consistency crushes brilliance every single time. Discipline is not about being strict. It's about being superior. It's deciding that your future self has more authority than your current feelings. It's ownership. It's dominance over your impulses. That's why disciplined men scare people. They can't be distracted. They can't be manipulated. They don't need validation. They operate on a code, and codes don't bend for comfort. Talent loves comfort. That's the part nobody tells you. Talent gets praised early, rewarded quickly, and protected constantly. When something comes easy, the mind starts to expect ease everywhere else. That's how talent quietly turns into laziness. Not obvious. Laziness, dangerous laziness. The kind that hides behind excuses like, I work better under pressure, or I just need the right opportunity. Meanwhile, time keeps moving and the gap keeps growing. A talented man waits for alignment. He waits to feel ready. He waits for confidence to appear, for motivation to strike, for circumstances to cooperate. That waiting feels productive in his head, but it produces nothing in the real world. Discipline doesn't wait. Discipline acts while the mind is arguing. It moves when conditions are wrong, energy is low, and progress feels invisible. That's the first separation. One man negotiates with himself. The other gives orders and expects compliance. Talent creates entitlement. When you've been told you're gifted, you start believing the world owes you results. You expect recognition without repetition. You expect rewards without routine. So when results don't arrive fast enough, frustration kicks in. Frustration turns into avoidance. Avoidance turns into wasted days. Discipline skips that entire emotional cycle. It doesn't care what you deserve. It only cares what you do again and again, especially when no one is watching. Here's the uncomfortable truth most people avoid. Talent makes you fragile. The first real resistance feels like an insult. The first failure feels personal. The ego gets involved. Discipline, on the other hand, trained you to absorb resistance as normal. Pain isn't feedback about your worth. It's just part of the process. That mindset difference is massive. One man protects his self-image. The other sharpens it through pressure. Discipline also compounds while talent plateaus. Talent shines early, then stalls. Discipline starts slow, almost invisible, then becomes unstoppable. Small actions repeated daily create momentum that talent alone can't match. The disciplined man doesn't look impressive at the start. That's why people underestimate him. But repetition builds precision. Precision builds confidence. Confidence builds authority. And authority eventually outpaces raw ability every single time. Look closely at high performers and you'll see a pattern. The ones who last aren't the most gifted, they're the most consistent. They show up on bad days, they work when it's boring, they execute when excitement is gone. Talent fades when novelty disappears. Discipline thrives in monotony. And the real world is monotony disguised as ambition. Talent needs praise to stay alive. Discipline feeds on standards. One depends on external validation. The other runs on internal law. That's why disciplined men don't collapse when applause disappears. They don't need permission, but they don't need hype. They already decided who they are and what they do daily to prove it. While talented men are waiting for the perfect moment, disciplined men are stacking quiet wins. While one is thinking about potential, the other is building evidence. That evidence becomes confidence. That confidence becomes presence. Presence changes how people respond to you. Opportunities don't magically appear. They gravitate toward men who are already in motion. Talent is flashy. Discipline is ruthless. Talent wants comfort. Discipline demands obedience. And in the long run, the man who moves without feeling ready will always outrun the man who waits for inspiration. Self-respect is not a feeling. It's a standard you enforce when nobody is watching. Most men claim they respect themselves because it sounds good, but their daily behavior exposes the lie. They hit snooze, break promises to themselves, overeat, overtalk, overreact, and then wonder why no one takes them seriously. The truth is simple and uncomfortable. If you don't control yourself, you don't respect yourself. And if you don't respect yourself, the world never will. Discipline is the physical expression of self-respect. It's not about being harsh or robotic. It's about deciding that your word to yourself matters more than comfort in the moment. When you say you'll train, work, study, or build, and then you do it regardless of mood, you send the clear signal to your own mind, I am in charge here. That signal compounds. Over time, your confidence stops being performative and starts being real, because it's backed by evidence. Men who lack discipline live in quiet contradiction. They talk about ambition, but live in habits that undermine it. They say they want control, yet they're controlled by appetite, distraction, and impulse. That internal mismatch creates insecurity. Not the loud kind, the subtle kind that leaks into posture, speech, and decision-making. People sense it immediately. They may not know why they don't trust you, but they don't. Inconsistency destroys authority. Self-respect shows up in small, brutal moments. Waking up when it's uncomfortable. Shutting your mouth when ego wants attention. Training when excuses are loud. Walking away from cheap pleasure that costs you tomorrow. These moments look insignificant in isolation, but together they shape identity. Every time you choose discipline, you reinforce the belief that you can rely on yourself. That belief is power. The opposite is just as true. Every broken promise to yourself teaches your mind that your words are meaningless. Over time, that erodes confidence at the root. You start doubting your own decisions. You seek validation because you don't trust your internal compass. You hesitate. You overthink. That's not bad luck. That's self-betrayal stacked over years. Discipline creates calm, not fake calm, not motivational hyper composure. When you know you've done the work, your nervous system settles. You don't need to posture. You don't need to explain yourself. Your presence speaks because it's grounded in action. This is why disciplined men move differently, slower, sharper, more deliberate. They don't rush because they're not chasing approval. There's also a social reality most men ignore. People treat you based on how you treat yourself. If you tolerate chaos in your habits, others will test your boundaries. If you let yourself slide, others will slide past you. Discipline draws lines. It says this is acceptable, this is not. And once you enforce that internally, enforcing it externally essentially becomes natural. Self-respect through discipline isn't glamorous. It's repetitive. It's often lonely. It requires choosing long-term authority over short-term pleasure, but it builds something most men never experience: internal alignment. No double life, no guilt, no constant mental noise. Just direction. Men chase confidence through words, clothes, money, and status. But all of that collapses without discipline underneath. Real confidence is quiet because it doesn't need to convince anyone. It knows. And that knowing comes from thousands of moments where you did what you said you would do, even when it was inconvenient. Control your time, your body, your reactions, and your standards, and self-respect stops being a concept and becomes a fact. Lose that control, and everything else becomes performance. Your emotions are not advisors. They are impulses dressed up as intelligence. Most men don't fail because they lack information or opportunity. They fail because they listen to how they feel in the moment and mistake that feeling for truth. Tired feels like a reason. Bored feels like a signal. Fear feels like intuition. None of it is reliable. Emotions react to comfort and threat, not to long-term outcomes. If your life sucks, if you lock it, you're weak, if you're lockerty. Motivation is the most overrated concept in modern culture. It shows up randomly, leaves without notice, and demands perfect conditions to function. Men wait for it like it's a green light. They tell themselves they'll start when they feel confident, energized, inspired. That moment rarely arrives, and when it does, it doesn't last. Building a life on motivation is like building on sand. Discipline is concrete. It works when motivation disappears, which is most of the time. Emotions are designed to conserve energy and avoid discomfort. They push you toward pleasure and away from effort. That made sense when survival meant avoiding pain. It does not work in a world that rewards sustained effort, delayed gratification, and repetition. When your emotions say rest, quit, distract, or escape, they're not protecting your future, they're protecting your comfort. That distinction matters. Men who achieve real power don't eliminate emotion, they demote it. Feelings become background noise, not marching orders. Discipline steps in as the operating system. It doesn't ask how you feel. It asks what needs to be done. That shift alone separates leaders from followers. One group negotiates with internal resistance. The other executes through it. Every excuse you've ever made was emotionally justified. Too tired, too stressed, too busy, too overwhelmed. Each one felt real in the moment, and each one quietly reinforced a dangerous pattern. Feelings dictate action. Over time, that pattern becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as capable of pushing through. You become someone who needs perfect conditions to perform. That's weakness, wearing logic as a disguise. Discipline interrupts that cycle. It creates distance between stimulus and response. You feel resistance, but you act anyway. You feel doubt, but you move forward. That gap is where control lives. The more often you choose action over emotion, the quieter those emotions become. Not because you suppress them, but because your mind learns they're not in charge. There's also a psychological cost to emotional obedience that few men acknowledge. Every time you let a feeling override a commitment, you train your mind to distrust you. Confidence erodes. Decisions feel heavier. You hesitate more. That's not anxiety, it's internal inconsistency. Discipline restores trust by proving repeatedly that your word means something regardless of mood. The disciplined man doesn't feel better before he acts. He feels better because he acts. That's the reversal most people miss. Action stabilizes emotion, not the other way around. Waiting to feel ready keeps you trapped. Moving forward creates momentum, and momentum reshapes how you feel. The order matters. Emotion-driven men live reactive lives. Their days are shaped by how they wake up feeling, what happens around them, who upsets them, what distracts them. Disciplined men live directed lives. They decide in advance what happens, then execute regardless of internal weather. That predictability builds strength. Strength builds confidence. Confidence builds authority. If you want reliability in results, you cannot rely on something as unstable as emotion. Feelings fluctuate. Discipline doesn't. That's why it wins. Every time. Identity is not something you discover. It's something you install through repeated behavior. Most men misunderstand this and spend their lives chasing a version of themselves they've never earned. They talk about who they are becoming while living in habits that contradict that fantasy. The mind doesn't listen to what you say. It studies what you do. And whatever you repeat long enough stops being an action and starts being an identity. Consistency is the force that rewires self-perception. The first few disciplined actions feel unnatural because they don't match who you currently are. You feel like an imposter waking up early, training hard, working in silence, staying focused when distraction is easy. That discomfort isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's proof the old identity is being challenged. Most men quit right there because they mistake discomfort for misalignment. In reality, it's transformation. Every repeated action casts a vote for the type of man you are. Skip once, and it feels harmless. Skip repeatedly, and it becomes your standard. The same rule applies in reverse. Show up once, and it's effort. Show up daily, and it becomes expectation. Eventually, discipline stops requiring force. It becomes automatic because your brain updates its self-image. You don't try to be disciplined anymore. You simply act in alignment with who you believe you are. This is why motivation fades, but habits endure. Motivation operates on emotion. Identity operates on certainty. When a man sees himself as disciplined, not disciplined today, but disciplined by nature, his behavior follows without debate. He doesn't argue with himself about training or working. A disciplined man skipping discipline feels wrong at a visceral level, like violating a personal law. Most men sabotage themselves by waiting for confidence before acting. That's backward. Confidence is not a prerequisite. It's a byproduct. You don't think your way into a new identity. You behave your way into it. Repetition removes doubt. Evidence kills insecurity. Once you've stacked enough proof, confidence becomes quiet and unshakable because it's grounded in experience, not hype. There's a reason inconsistent men over-explain themselves. They're trying to compensate for the lack of internal certainty. Disciplined men don't explain, they move. Their identity does the talking. Consistency sharpens decision-making because you stop reinventing yourself every day. You already know what you do. That clarity saves energy and increases execution speed. An identity shift also changes how you respond to pressure. When discipline is part of who you are, stress doesn't derail you. It activates you. You don't see difficulty as a threat to your self-image. You see it as confirmation of it. Hard days become opportunities to reinforce identity, not excuses to abandon it. That mental framing is rare and it's powerful. Most people are addicted to novelty, new plans, new routines, new inspiration. That addiction keeps identity shallow. Consistency feels boring because it lacks novelty, but boredom is where depth is built. Repeating the same disciplined actions strips away illusion and exposes reality. You either become the man who does the work or the man who keeps resetting. Over time, disciplined consistency eliminates internal conflict. You stop feeling like two different people, the one with ambition and the one with excuses. Alignment replaces tension. That alignment is strength. It shows in posture, tone, and presence. People sense it before you speak. They respond differently because you are different. Identity is not declared. It's demonstrated daily through behavior you repeat, whether you feel like it or not. Consistency doesn't just change what you do, it changes who you are allowed to be. Pressure doesn't create weakness, it exposes it. Most men misunderstand this because they've spent their lives avoiding discomfort, so when pressure finally arrives, it feels unfair, overwhelming, personal. They panic, freeze, or fold. Not because the situation is impossible, but because they were never trained to operate inside resistance. Discipline is that training. It's rehearsal for chaos. And when chaos shows up, the disciplined man doesn't rise to the occasion. He defaults to his standard. Talent collapses under pressure because talent relies on flow. It needs things to feel right. It depends on rhythm, confidence, momentum. Pressure disrupts all of that. It brings uncertainty, fatigue, doubt, and urgency. The talented man starts questioning himself. His internal dialogue gets noisy. He hesitates at the exact moment decisiveness is required. Discipline doesn't require clarity. It functions inside confusion. That's why it wins when stakes are high. Pressure strips away personality and reveals systems. When time is short and consequences are real, you don't have room for creativity or emotion. You fall back on what you've practiced. Disciplined men have rehearsed discomfort daily. Early mornings, repetition, boredom, physical and mental strain. So when pressure hits, it feels familiar. Not comfortable, but known. And what's known is manageable. Undisciplined men experience pressure as threat. Disciplined men experience it as signal. A signal that it's time to lock in, narrow focus, and execute. No drama, no panic, no self-pity. That emotional neutrality under stress is dominance. It's what leaders are made of. People instinctively look to the calmest person in the room when things go wrong. Calm doesn't come from confidence alone, it comes from preparation. Most men crumble because their discipline disappears when conditions get tough. They train when it's easy. They work when it's convenient. They focus when distractions are low. That's not discipline, that's compliance with comfort. Real discipline is built when everything inside you resists. That's why pressure reveals who's real. It exposes whether your habits were cosmetic or foundational. There's a biological component people ignore. Under pressure, your nervous system spikes. Heart rate increases, breathing shortens, cognitive bandwidth narrows. If you've never trained yourself to function in that state, your performance drops fast. Discipline, repetition under stress conditions your system to stay functional. You don't become emotionless, you become efficient. You conserve energy, you act instead of react. Pressure also eliminates excuses. There's no time to justify yourself. Results matter immediately. Disciplined men are comfortable in that environment because their identity isn't fragile. Failure doesn't shatter them. Difficulty doesn't insult them. They don't interpret pressure as judgment. It's just part of the game. That detachment keeps them sharp while others spiral. Watch how men behave when something goes wrong. The undisciplined start explaining. They blame timing, circumstances, other people. The disciplined adjust. They adapt without noise. That difference determines who gets trusted with responsibility. Pressure is the gatekeeper to higher levels, and discipline is the only reliable passcode. Dominance under pressure isn't loud. It's controlled. It's measured speech, decisive movement, and a refusal to be emotionally hijacked. That presence is earned, not imagined. It's built through thousands of reps where quitting was easier and excuses were available, but discipline was chosen instead. When pressure becomes intense, talent hopes. Discipline executes. And execution under pressure is the rarest skill in the world. Talent without discipline is decoration. It looks impressive from a distance, but it produces nothing when it actually matters. The world is full of gifted men who never became dangerous because they never learned how to control themselves. They had potential, ideas, intelligence, creativity, but no structure. And without structure, everything leaks. Energy leaks. Focus leaks. Time leaks. Eventually, opportunity leaks too. Average men hate this truth because it removes their favorite excuse. They want to believe success belongs to the naturally gifted, so failure feels justified. Talented men hate it even more because it exposes the uncomfortable reality that their gift isn't enough. Discipline doesn't care about your starting point. It doesn't ask where you came from or how special you are. It only measures output over time. That's why discipline levels the field and then quietly tilts it in favor of those who endure. Empires are not built by brilliance. They're built by men who show up relentlessly. Businesses scale because systems are followed, bodies are forged because routines are respected. Skills compound because practice is non-negotiable. None of that requires exceptional talent. It requires obedience to a process long after excitement fades. The man who can repeat boring actions with precision will always outperform the man who relies on flashes of genius. Talent creates expectation without resilience. When things don't move fast enough, talented men get frustrated. When resistance appears, they feel wronged. They were told it would be easier for them. Discipline never makes that promise. It prepares you for resistance by assuming it's guaranteed. That assumption changes everything. You stop being surprised by difficulty. You stop taking setbacks personally. You keep moving while others stall. Average men with discipline become terrifying because they're underestimated. Nobody sees them as a threat early on. They're ignored, overlooked, dismissed. That's an advantage. While attention is elsewhere, they're stacking reps. While others chase recognition, they're building leverage. By the time people notice, the gap is too large to close. Discipline turns ordinary effort into extraordinary results through accumulation. One day means nothing. 1 month looks unimpressive. 1 year changes your position. 5 years changes your status. Talent wants immediate payoff. Discipline plays a longer game and wins by default because most people quit before the curve turns upward. There's also a mental shift that happens when discipline replaces talent as your foundation. You stop tying your self-worth to outcomes. You focus on execution. That makes you stable. Stability under pressure is rare. Rare things are valuable. That's why disciplined men rise into leadership positions, while more talented men remain unreliable options. Look at who actually runs things. It's rarely the most gifted person in the room. It's the most consistent, the one who can be trusted to deliver repeatedly without drama, the one who doesn't disappear when things get hard. Talent attracts attention. Discipline attracts responsibility. Responsibility attracts power. Without discipline, talent decays. Skills dull. Focus scatters. Confidence erodes. With discipline, even limited ability sharpens over time. You learn faster because you practice more. You improve because you stay longer. You win because you're still standing when others burn out. This is the part most people resist accepting. Discipline doesn't just compensate for lack of talent. It makes talent irrelevant. In a long enough timeline, consistency overwhelms everything else. The disciplined man doesn't need to be special. He becomes unstoppable simply by refusing to stop. That's why discipline is dangerous. It gives ordinary men the ability to build extraordinary lives, and it exposes talented men who never learned how to work. Talent without discipline is wasted DNA. Discipline without talent still builds empires. If you want power, stop chasing motivation. Stop worshiping gifts you didn't earn. Build structure so brutal that even on your worst day, you outperform undisciplined men on their best. This is the final truth. Discipline isn't a tool. It's an identity. And once you adopt it, you don't compete, you replace.